It's finally time for a stop back home in our good old Earth 616, the mid-2000s. The United States military still hasn't given up on a dream it's chased since the Second World War, the dream of recreating the super soldier, of building another man like the one the world lost decades ago. Leading that effort is General Thaddeus Ross, a hard, ambitious career officer who has spent his life in uniform and believes the next great weapon is worth almost any cost. To get there, he turns to the science of gamma radiation, and he hands the work to a brilliant young researcher named Bruce Banner, who is working side by side with Ross's daughter, Betty. But Ross doesn't tell Banner the whole truth. Bruce believes he's working on something protective, a way to make the human body immune to gamma radiation. He doesn't know the general's real goal is a weapon. And that gap between what Banner thinks he's building and what he's actually building is where everything breaks. The experiment goes wrong, and it goes wrong on Bruce himself. He takes the full force of a gamma radiation accident, and it doesn't destroy him, it changes him. From that day on, when his heart races, when anger takes him, his body becomes something else, something enormous, something he cannot control. The Hulk. Bruce Banner is not a man who wanted power. He's a man horrified by what's now living inside him, by what it could do to anyone who gets close. And the accident has already proven that fear right. Betty was caught in the blast, hurt badly enough to be rushed to a hospital. But while she lies there unconscious, something else happens that hardens Bruce's decision. Ross comes to him. And Ross doesn't talk about the daughter he just nearly lost, or the experiment that just ruined Banner's life. He talks about the asset. He tells Bruce that what's inside him now is a weapon, and that the weapon that Bruce himself belongs to the United States Army. The man who built this disaster is already trying to take ownership of it, so Bruce makes his choice. He doesn't wait for Betty to wake up. He simply disappears, walking away from the work, the life, and the woman he loves. Because being near them now puts them in danger from two different things: the monster inside him and the man who wants to put that monster on a leash. But disappearing doesn't make him free. Ross turns the full weight of the United States military toward finding one man. He brands Banner a fugitive, a thief of government secrets. And what begins as a search becomes an international manhunt that stretches on for 5 long years. Some debts are not paid in coin. By 2006, one of them comes due in a hotel room in Budapest, and the woman it is owed to has spent her whole life trying to outrun it. You remember her from episode 7. One of the 2 little girls the Red Room took back, the one we promised would one day stand at the side of Earth's greatest heroes. This is where that promise starts to keep itself. Her name is Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, and by now she has become so dangerous, so good at the only thing she was ever taught to do, that even the world's most secretive intelligence agency, the S.H.I.E.L.D, decides she cannot be left walking. Their director, Nick Fury, the same man we watched begin building something bigger back in episode 7, gives the order. And he sends the one agent in the world he trusts to carry it out. A man called Hawkeye, Clint Barton. A marksman so precise he is said never to miss. And the rare kind of soldier who, somewhere behind the bow, has never quite stopped seeing the person on the other end of the shot. But when Barton finds her in Budapest, he sees something he wasn't briefed on. He sees a woman who wants out. So Barton makes what Natasha would later call, simply, a different call. He doesn't carry the order out. He offers her something instead. A door no one in her life had ever held open for her. Out of the dark, into something else. Natasha walks through it. A door like that has a price. To prove she has truly turned, the S.H.I.E.L.D sends her back into the dark one more time, partnered with Barton, and the target could not be more personal. Dreykov, the man who took her childhood. For Natasha, this is not an assignment. It is the end of the thing that made her. But Dreykov has lived his whole life as a ghost. The only thing in the world that can lead her to him is the one person in it he loves, his young daughter. So Natasha makes the coldest choice of her career. She uses the girl. And when the building comes down on Dreykov, it comes down on his daughter too. The woman who walks out of that rubble is not the woman who walked in. What followed became one of the last true legends inside the S.H.I.E.L.D. 10 days in a city that wanted them both gone. Two operatives hunted across a foreign capital with no one in the world to trust but each other. By the time Budapest spit them back out, Natasha and Clint were the kind of partners only forged in places like that, the kind that last a lifetime. And Natasha walks away believing the job is done, believing Dreykov is gone and the Red Room with him, believing she is, at long last, free. That belief is the only thing that lets her sleep at night for the next 15 years, and it is a lie. Every soul has a price, and there has always been someone keeping count. He has worn 1,000 names across 1,000 years. The one that lasted is Mephisto. When a desperate man signs away the only thing he truly owns, Mephisto does not simply collect it, he forges it. He takes that soul and burns it down into a thing of hellfire and judgment, a spirit of vengeance, and sends it back out to drag in the next name on the list. The world has a word for what he makes, a Ghost Rider. And on a world that sits just beside our own, Earth 121347, that list has been open for a very long time. Roughly a century and a half ago, on the American frontier, the next name on it belonged to a Texas Ranger called Carter Slade. He had been a good man once, before greed hollowed him out, and greed is what put the rope around his neck. So when the stranger appeared with the old offer, a life for a soul, Slade did what desperate men have always done. He signed, and Mephisto sent him to the town of San Venganza to collect a prize unlike any the list had ever held. 1,000 souls bound together in a single contract. So much evil gathered in one place that it could tear a hole between hell and the living world. Slade rode in and took it, and then, holding in his hands the one thing his master wanted most, Carter Slade did something no rider had ever dared. He said no. He turned on the devil who made him, ran with the contract into the dark, and hid it so deep that even hell lost the trail. And here you might be wondering the obvious thing. If Mephisto owned his soul, why couldn't he simply reach out and drag him back? Because that is not how the bargain works. The devil can give the curse of the rider, but he cannot take it back, not without the cursed man's own consent. Slade understood that, so he did the one thing the devil never expected from him. He stopped. He never called on the fire again. He let the power go quiet inside him until the trail of hellfire that should have led Mephisto straight to him simply went cold. He dug himself a grave with his own name on it, let the world believe the rider was long dead, and became nobody at all, an old man tending a cemetery, hiding in plain sight among ordinary people for 150 years. He passed out of history and into legend, and legends, when the time comes, have a way of being needed again. 150 years later, in 2007, the next name came up, Johnny Blaze. 17 years old, a boy who lived his whole life inside a traveling carnival, learning to ride a motorcycle the same way other kids learn to walk. His father was the headline act. Johnny was the kid in his shadow, in love with a girl named Roxanne, with a plan to take her and run, out of the carnival, into a life he had built up in his head the very next morning. That same night, he learned his father was dying, and Johnny was the kind of boy who would do anything to stop it, even something he could never take back. So the stranger came to him with the same offer he had once made Slade, a life for a soul. By morning, his father was healed, and his father, waking up to find the sickness gone, believed for one beautiful morning that he had cheated life itself. That belief is what put him on the bike that day. He climbed onto it certain that a man who had just survived the impossible could survive anything, and rode straight into a stunt no man could have survived. Johnny had saved him from the sickness and lost him to despair, the way only the devil could make those two things mean the same thing. The soul he had traded still belonged to Mephisto, so Johnny did the only thing he could think to do. He left Roxanne without a word. He left the carnival. He left the boy he used to be, and he disappeared into the road. And then, for years, nothing happened. The devil who had taken his soul went silent on him. No visit, no sign, no collection day. Just a long stretch of empty highway where his damnation was supposed to be. Johnny could not live with that silence, so he started doing the only thing he knew how to do, louder. He climbed onto a bike and threw himself across longer jumps, higher jumps, jumps no man should have been able to walk away from, daring the universe to send him an answer, a sign. Anything that told him the deal could still be broken. Each time he survived, his crew swore he must have an angel watching over him. Johnny knew better. He understood, somewhere deep, that the only thing keeping him alive through all of it was the devil keeping him alive on purpose, saving him for the day the bargain finally came due. What Johnny did not know was that, far older than him, the devil's own house was beginning to crack. Mephisto had a son. His name was Blackheart, and he wanted his father's throne. There was something on Earth that could give it to him. The same contract of 1,000 souls Carter Slade had buried a century and a half before. Find that contract, and even the devil himself could be overthrown. So Blackheart came to Earth to find it. And in 2007, that was the moment Mephisto remembered the boy from the carnival. Johnny Blaze became the next Ghost Rider, bound to serve the same master Slade once turned on. But before the curse came for him, the past did. Roxanne walked back into Johnny's life as a reporter, sent to cover the most famous stunt rider in the country. Sent, in other words, to interview the boy she had spent half her life trying to forget. For one impossible afternoon, Johnny was given the thing every man like him spends his life dreaming about, a second chance. A chance to undo the worst thing he had ever done. They made a plan to see each other that night, and it was that night, of all the nights in his life, that the devil chose to call him in. Johnny changed for the first time. The man he had been disappeared into a thing of bone and hellfire, and the rider went out into the city to hunt the wicked, the way every ghost rider before him had. And that very same night, he came face to face for the first time with the very thing Mephisto had sent him to stop, Blackheart, the devil's own son, in the flesh, hunting for the contract. They tore at each other through the streets of the city, and by morning, neither one had finished the other. When the sun came up and Johnny was Johnny again, he found himself somewhere he had not chosen, a quiet cemetery on the edge of town, lying in the grass at the foot of an old chapel. The rider had brought him there. The spirit, it turned out, knew where it belonged. What it had brought him to was an old man tending the graves. The man knew Johnny's name before Johnny ever gave it. He knew what Johnny was and what he was about to become. He called himself the caretaker, and he had been waiting for this rider for a very long time. Johnny did not really hear him. He had too much on his mind, and the biggest part of it was the woman whose night he had just ruined. He went to her to apologize, and Roxanne shut the door on him. She had spent the better part of her adult life learning not to care about Johnny Blaze, and she was not going to let him walk back through that door so easily. But love is a stubborn thing. By nightfall, she came back to him on her own, not to forgive him, but to ask the one question she had carried for years. Why did you leave? So he told her. The deal, the devil, the rider, the whole impossible truth of his life. And of course, she did not believe him. The man she had once loved had turned into someone who told fairy tales to dodge a real conversation. She walked out a second time, and this time it really did feel final. Meanwhile, the things the rider had done the night before could not stay buried for long. A road on fire, wreckage no human could have caused, witnesses. The police pieced enough of it together to put Johnny's name on a list, and they brought him in for answers. It was the worst thing they could have done to him. A holding cell is not a holding cell to a ghost rider. It is a room full of the kind of men the rider was built to punish. Night fell. The curse rose. And what happened in that cell was the devil's mercy turning a cage into a hunting ground. By morning, Johnny was free again, on Blackheart's trail again, and waking up again in the same cemetery where the spirit had taken him before. Only this time, the old man tending the graves had Johnny's full attention. And this time, the old man told him the legend of a Texas Ranger who had once stood where Johnny was now standing, the first rider to defy the devil and hide the contract from him. He told Johnny everything about that man. He just left out the part where that man was him. And here the legend closes its circle. Blackheart had been one step ahead the whole time. He had already taken something Johnny could not live without, Roxanne, and he offered to trade her for the contract. So Johnny came back to the old man and asked for it anyway, knowing the cost, knowing the risk. And the old man, faced with a rider asking for the one thing he had spent 150 years refusing to give up, finally took the mask off. The caretaker was Carter Slade. He had been Slade the whole time. And Slade, who had once damned himself for greed, saw a man asking for the same impossible thing he had once asked for, but for the exact opposite reason. Johnny wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it for love. And to a rider who had spent 150 years carrying the weight of his own selfish bargain, that was the one reason worth handing the contract over for. Slade gave him the contract. Then, for the first time since the frontier, he climbed onto his horse and rode one final ride at Johnny's side, out toward the ghost town of San Venganza, where the legend had begun. Johnny won, but winning taught him what Slade already knew, that he was never meant to be free in this, only useful. So he made the same choice the rider before him made. He kept the power instead of handing it back, and he turned the weapon hell gave him against hell itself. Years later, we will find Johnny a changed man, living alone, far from everyone, an exile still chained to a curse he has spent his life trying to break. What pulls him back out of the dark is a boy, and a devil who wants that boy's body for himself. But that is a ride for another time. Let's do one last stop on Earth 96283. It is 2007, and for the first time in a long time, Peter Parker is a man at peace with his own life. The city loves him. The press writes him into headlines. Mary Jane is on a Broadway stage. And in his pocket, Peter is carrying a ring he plans to give her any day now. The boy from Queens has finally caught up to his own life, and for a brief stretch of time, he gets to enjoy it. One quiet night, a small meteor falls out of the sky and breaks open near Peter, and out of it crawls a living thing the planet has never seen before. A creature from far past our own solar system, looking for a host strong enough to give it a body. It finds one. It hides itself on Peter's moped and begins to wait. Peter never sees it. While Peter went about his life unaware, an old wound in it was sharpening itself into a blade. Harry Osborn has spent the last year forging himself into a new kind of goblin, in his father's image, and he comes for the boy who was once his closest friend. The two of them fight like brothers turned strangers, until a blow to the head takes the truth straight out of Harry's mind. When he wakes in a hospital bed, the memory of what Peter is has fallen out of him, and the friend he used to be has come back in its place. For a moment, Peter is given a piece of his old life again. He does not yet understand how cruel a mercy that truly is. Not long after, Spider-Man saves a young woman from a deadly accident in broad daylight, and the city decides he is a hero worth honoring. They throw him a parade. Peter Parker has reached the top of his own life. What Peter does not see, from up where he is the woman who loves him quietly losing her footing on the way down. Mary Jane has been booed off her stage. Her career is slipping out of her hands, and every time she tries to tell Peter, he is too high on the sound of his own name to really listen. Peter is living his best life, completely unaware that the woman beside him is not. And while Peter is at the top of his life, the floor begins to slide out from under it. The job he has been chasing at the newspaper, the steady photographer's spot at the Daily Bugle, is handed to someone else, a young rival named Eddie Brock, who has been hungrier and louder for it. Peter is humiliated. The city he just got the key to has started to forget his name for someone else's, and while he is still nursing that wound, an even bigger one announces itself in broad daylight. A creature made of sand rises up in the middle of the city and tears open an armored car. Desperate for money he is trying to get his hands on for reasons no one will learn until the very end. He outmatches Spider-Man before disappearing into the streets. Peter has no idea who he just fought. Still blind to the woman beside him, Peter decides to do the one thing he has been planning for months, the big move. He takes Mary Jane out, ring in his pocket, ready to give her the night of her life. And the night goes wrong before he can even ask. She is hurting, he is not listening, and what was supposed to be the question of a lifetime never gets out of his mouth. Mary Jane walks out alone. Peter goes home shaken, and the phone rings. It is the police chief. There is something Peter needs to hear, and there is no soft way to say it. The man Peter had spent his life believing took Uncle Ben had been only the accomplice. The man who had truly done it was still walking the earth. His name was Flint Marko, the very same man, made now of sand, that Peter had just fought in the street that afternoon. Something hardens inside Peter that he does not know how to name. The grief he believed he had buried with his uncle is back, and this time it has somewhere to go. He puts the suit on and hunts. He waits long into the night for any sign of Marco. Eventually, exhaustion takes him, and Peter falls asleep in his costume. Here's the thing I have not told you yet. The creature that crawled onto his moped weeks ago did not stay there. It had followed Peter home and lived in the walls of his life ever since, biding its time for a night exactly like this one. While Peter slept, the creature found him at last. By the time he woke, the suit was black, and so was what lived in him. What the creature did to Peter Parker in the weeks that followed was the oldest exchange there is. It gave him strength and speed and a sharpened edge, and in return it asked for small pieces of who he was. He gave them up without knowing. He hunted Marco down and believed he had finally avenged his uncle. He had not. Marco had survived, the way men in this kind of story always do, but that was a truth Peter would not learn until later. What he did with the rest of the creature's gift was uglier still. He destroyed a struggling photographer named Eddie Brock, exposed a lie of his, ended his career on the spot. Not because he had to, but because the thing inside him took pleasure in it. He paraded his classmate Gwen in front of Mary Jane to twist the knife, and when Mary Jane finally raised her voice to him, he raised his hand back. He struck the woman he had been carrying a ring around for. That was the moment Peter Parker saw himself for the first time since the creature had taken him. He looked at his own hand and did not recognize it. He climbed into the dark of an old bell tower that same night, and he tore the thing off of himself the only way it could be torn, through the ringing of the bells, the one sound the creature could not endure. He bled it off his body, piece by piece, until what was left of him collapsed to the floor as a man again. But a thing like that does not die because a man rejects it. It only goes looking for the next one. And it had been listening, all this time, for the angriest and most humiliated heart it could find. It found Eddie Brock, who had come to pray for the end of Peter Parker that very night. The creature took him. The two of them became one. Venom, a Spider-Man wearing all the rage Peter had finally walked away from. Venom went looking for help, and he found it in the only other man in the city who hated Spider-Man enough to listen. Flint Marko, still alive, still grieving a daughter of his own. The two of them took Mary Jane and waited for Peter to come. Peter went, knowing he would be outnumbered, and help arrived from the last place on Earth he would ever have expected it. Harry, his memory returned and the truth about his father finally clear, chose Peter one more time over the grief that had ruled him for years. The fight cost Harry everything, but before he was gone, the friend he had once been was the one beside him. And in the rubble afterward, when Flint Marko was the last enemy left standing, he told Peter the thing he had never been able to tell anyone, that the night Uncle Ben had been taken, he had never meant to do it. It had been an accident, born of a desperate moment in a man's own life. The weight of it had followed him every day since. Peter, standing as himself again in the ruin of everything, gave Marko the one thing Peter had never believed he could give: forgiveness, and he let him go. And so this Peter Parker walks back into the rest of his life lighter and heavier at the same time. A best friend in the ground. A version of himself he never wants to meet again, still living somewhere in the back of his mind. And a woman he almost lost, whom he must now learn how to find his way back to. The boy from Queens has learned the oldest lesson the suit had to teach him, that the worst monsters a man fights are the ones he carries inside.